Our hymn this week does not in fact appear in the 1982 hymnal, but is instead a staple in the English hymns ancient and modern, and is a singularly appropriate hymn when considering one's relationship with their country. I Vow to Thee, My Country was a poem written by Sir Cecil Spring Rice in either 1908 or 1912, under the title Orbs Dei, meaning the City of God, or alternatively, the Two Fatherlands. Cecil, born in 1859, was a career diplomat. His first international posting was to Japan in 1892 and Korea the following year. Over the next decade, he was sent to Washington, Berlin, Tehran, Cairo, and St. Petersburg. In 1906, he was made British minister to Persia, and in 1908, he became ambassador to Sweden. Following 4 years in Sweden, Cecil was named ambassador to the United States, which had long been an aspiration of his. 2 years after his appointment, World War I broke out, and Cecil's task became ending American neutrality. Strong anti-British and non-interventionist feelings in the United States made his task all the more challenging, but his prolonged efforts were ultimately successful, and the United States entered the war in 1917. In spite of his success, he was called back to England in mid-January of 1918. As he traveled through Canada on his return, he died unexpectedly at age 58. It is now thought that an underlying Graves' disease was exacerbated by stress and exhaustion, but his friends and family suggested that following his removal from office, Cecil had died of a broken heart. Henry Cabot Lodge, a senator from Massachusetts, said of his friend, "The sudden cessation of his work and responsibilities in which his heart was bound up caused him the loss of the will to live." Cecil's poem Orbs Dei is only 2 stanzas, reflecting the alternate title given in 1918, The Two Fatherlands. The original 1912 version anthropomorphized Britannia with a sword and shield. "I heard my country calling away across the sea. Across the waste of waters she calls and calls to me. Her sword is girded at her side, her helmet on her head, and around her feet are lying the dying and the dead. I hear the noise of battle, the thunder of her guns. I haste to thee, my mother, a son among thy sons." This stanza was never set to music, and so now is largely overlooked as part of the poem. The second stanza, or the first one we sing, describes one's unquestioned devotion to their country. The love that asks no questions could be viewed with suspicion in our own time, as we are encouraged to think critically about the political process and identify areas of improvement in a nation that is far from perfect. In 1912, however, Cecil Spring Rice would have been immersed in the pervasive nationalistic rhetoric that eventually gave rise to the World War. So the idea of love that makes undaunted the final sacrifice would have not only been acceptable, but expected. This first verse is strongly contrasted with the second, which describes one's responsibility to the kingdom of God. As opposed to the worldly things we can quantify in our own countries, we may not count her armies, we may not see her king. This stanza offers a welcome alternative to the world on the brink of war in 1912, as Cecil paints a picture of a boundless land where everything is gentleness and peace. The tune we use to sing this hymn is by English composer Gustav Holst. It is drawn from the middle section of Jupiter from his orchestral suite, The Planets. The stately tune was extended slightly to allow for the final 2 lines of the poem, which Holst was asked to set to music in 1921. Holst's daughter Imogen remembered that at the time when he was asked to set these words to music, Holst was so overworked and overweary that he felt relieved to discover they fit the tune from Jupiter. The tune was named Thaxted after the village in which Holst lived for many years, but it did not receive that name until it was officially added as a hymn in the 1926 edition of Songs of Praise, edited by Holst's dear friend Ralph Vaughan Williams. The hymn quickly became a favorite in England, both as a spiritual and patriotic song. It was sung at the funerals of Winston Churchill, Princess Diana, and Margaret Thatcher. In spite of recent criticism of the militaristic imagery, the hymn has stayed in the hearts of all who love their country here on earth and the kingdom of God beyond. Please enjoy I Vow to Thee, My Country.